The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm so excited that I am here with the beautiful and fabulous and talented and intelligent Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Good morning, Dr. Doreen.
Good morning, Shannon. Good morning, everyone.
I'm so thrilled to be, and obviously I'm here live in the studio and you are on location, and we thank you and welcome you from location and thrilled to have you here. Can I just say that I just had this moment of gratitude, and it is Thanksgiving month. It's the month of gratitude, November, and I just had this moment of gratitude of how lucky I am that I get to be here this morning with you talking about this with Chris at the helm, and it's a great day and I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm feeling the gratitude.
And thanks for reminding me that how important it is to be grateful for these things. Thank you, Shannon. I'm grateful too.
Yeah, it's a wonderful day to be here. And we're grateful that you're here with us if you're watching us live. And we are live right now. It's Tuesday morning. It's November 7th. 2023, and we're live. Dr. Granpeesheh is live as well. That would be hard if you were recorded and I was live. That would take some interesting doing. But anyway, but the show will podcast later on today and be available. So if you're watching us in podcast, we welcome you too. Either way, there are ways to get in contact with us if you would like to have your question answered by Dr. Granpeesheh. If this is your first time watching, you may not know that Dr. Granpeesheh is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for more than 45 years. I know, shut the front door. What's that about? She doesn't look like she's been on the planet for 45 years, but she's been doing really good work in this field. I believe the best work that there is in this field, helping so many individuals on the spectrum and their families and professionals to all get on the same page and be of service to the individual who is on the spectrum, to help them to accomplish things that are important to them in their life. So I am your biggest fan, but I have to sometimes muscle other people out of the way because they want to. There are so many people who want to be labeled your biggest fan. So I am not alone in this. But we're thrilled that she's here, and you guys can be writing in questions. She donates this time to be with us to answer your questions from around the world. If you have a question, you can write in live right now on Facebook and YouTube, and Chris will show you on the screen some of the ways that you can be doing that. But if you are listening to us in podcasts, which we know so many of you do, you can always still write in. You can go to Ask Dr. Doreen's website and write in your question there. There's a button that says contact us. And that button goes directly to Marina, who is amazing, and makes sure that I get those questions. And we're going to answer a couple of those questions first thing this morning. But you can also contact me directly. I'm Shannon at autism-live.com. When you do, I try to get back to you as soon as possible. If for some reason you don't hear from me, email me again, because you're never bugging me. But sometimes emails go poof in the internet, and sometimes my brain goes poof in the office. I don't know. So there we go. Feel free to contact us often. And I think we should jump in. Our overriding topic today is dealing with conflict. And we've already had some people write in some doozy of conflict things. I want to start saying good morning to Anna and to Susie Bay. So thrilled that you're here. Our first question came in on your website, Dr. Granpeesheh, and it says, can you help me please? My neighbor and I have units that are attached to each other, and we share the land. We have to consult and get consent for anything related to drainage and structural work done on our houses. We also share common areas. I have been here for many years, and my neighbor moved in during the pandemic years. I have friends on the spectrum, and I am positive that she is also on the spectrum. She inherited a number of issues that needed addressing when she got the house, and she was informed about that before purchasing her home, which she has just shrugged off when we wrote to her. She will not communicate with us face-to-face over anything. And we have been told that we are bullies, manipulative, and controlling in every email we receive from her. She has stopped us from accessing our shared line and has taken trespass orders out on us. She has even had workmen who have been working on her property come to our house and threaten us that they will go to the police if we contact with her. I have no idea what she must be saying to them. I have worked very hard to be polite in every interaction that we have had, and I'm trying to be understanding, but my patience is wearing thin. We have a shared drive, which she travels daily, and it is not uncommon for her to be very rude to us if we are outside the home. Can you please help me to better understand her? We are looking at having to take legal action if we need to get the issue resolved. And I've since had an email with her, and I know that it's very important to this person writing in that she would rather not take legal action. She really wants to come to some sort of equitable understanding, but she feels like she doesn't know what steps to take. So we defer to you. How can we help her?
I mean, it's so difficult and to help because we don't really know everything there is to know about the circumstances, but clearly there's been a misunderstanding, perhaps, right? And the neighbor is, for some reason, feeling very attacked and has therefore become very defensive. And I think in situations like that, anything you can do to lower those defenses is probably going to be helpful. And again, who knows if this individual is on the spectrum or if they have other past history or something in their life that results in them behaving the way they are. But everybody, obviously, we are the result of our experiences, right? So I think if you want to avoid legal action, then I think maybe the only thing you've not tried is being very, very, very nice. Maybe take over or send over or leave at her door some sort of gift, like, I don't know, maybe pastries or, whatever you might want to give your neighbor, and a card that says, hey, we got off on the wrong foot and I'm sorry, and we're neighbors and we need to do better with each other, and why don't you tell us how we can communicate with you? Like, really open the doors to kindness, compassion. I think whenever we give kindness and compassion, people tend to lower their defenses. And you have to be patient with it and see if that works. And then, unfortunately, if it doesn't work, then I don't think you have any other option but to take legal action. And nobody wants to do that with their neighbor. It just causes so much stress for everyone.
Can I tell you what this reminded me of? Years ago, when my son was being treated at CARD, we were in a different building, and you probably remember there was a person who sat at the front desk. I'm not going to use names. and this person was a very interesting person, and meant a lot to us in our son's journey. Because she was very kind to my son. She had a big fish tank, and it was a big deal the first time that she said to him, would you like to feed the fish? And it was such a big deal that he always wanted to come back and see her so that he could talk to her fish and feed her fish. So I had great love for this person. But there was a day that came that, it's a long story, but a friend had asked me if I would do, for her business, do this news thing. So I had a news person in my living room who then heard our story that our son had autism, and he said, I'd like to interview the both of you about this. And I said, and there was a behavior technician from CARD there. I said, I'm fairly certain I have to get approval on this. So I called and got this person on the phone at the front desk, and I said, I didn't realize that he was going to ask this, but he's asking to, and I know that I have to get approval. And this person was very rigid, had very much rules, and there's a time and a place for that, right? And she said, well, you have to get written approval on that. And I said, I'm totally aware of that, but the person is here. Could you potentially walk down the hallway and no, I cannot leave the desk. And I said, can you pick up the phone then and call somebody to see if you could get approval? And that's all I said, right? And she did get somebody on the phone for me who gave us approval, who said, yes, we'd like for you to do that interview. But then the next time I saw her, she said, man, I've never seen that side of you before. You were just coming at me. And I said, what do you mean? What? And she said, because you just kept coming at me. I told you no, and then you had this other idea. You were just coming at me. And it was so interesting to me because in her eyes, I was yelling at her.
Yeah.
Because even though she had said no, I was suggesting other things.
Yeah.
But I just didn't accept her no. That was the equivalent. She said, I've just never seen you like that. And you were just like a bear and you just kept coming at me. And I was as shocked as I can be very persistent. And I'm a big woman and I'm strident. And sometimes I don't realize, but she was a big woman too. And we were on the phone, but that was how she described it. You were coming at me. And it made me realize people have their own way of seeing things that they perceive as conflict. And it's not about that. My dear friend says if it's hysterical, it's historical, meaning it's not about this interaction. But as you said, everybody comes preloaded with their past, and maybe it's something in her past. But
For sure.
But I knew that I had to backtrack with this person and get very interested in her recipes for several months because that was a big currency with her. Because I didn't want her to not be on our side. She was the keeper of the keys, right? So it's hard though, because sometimes people react and are
For
very
sure.
reactive.
And that's a great example, Shannon. And in that example, you had to, I guess, make sure that your defenses don't go up now that she's kind of attacking you. And that's often what happens, is that one person misinterprets a situation based on their own past, and then they become assertive, aggressive in some way, and then the other person gets defensive, right? And then it becomes a battle. And so it is all about how we perceive other people's communications, I guess. And that person, great example, because that person had a lot of prior history that led to her being very upset about a variety of things that were never intended to upset her. So it's really about how we receive and perceive communication from others.
Christy has written in and said, I remember someone saying once that we need to remember that all disagreements or arguments are people just trying to get their needs met.
Exactly.
Which
exactly.
But it can be hard when the other, and we're going to talk about this more in a minute with conflict. It can be hard when the person that you're talking to, and we don't know for sure with this person, but if it is someone who that is actually a deficit for them, is perspective taking, seeing the other person's side, it can make it extra hard.
That's right. And that's kind of one of the things we talk a lot about with our individuals on the spectrum, that perspective taking is very difficult for them. And so it does make it much harder for them to interact, because seeing the world from someone else's perspective is extremely difficult. But and again, recently I was frustrated with something because there was just so much work going on over the last couple of months, and a friend said to me, just all they want is some love. Just give them some love and things will be better. And it was so true. It was all about, like, people generally will lower their defenses if you show love and kindness. If you are able to do that, because we all have our own defenses, if you're able to do that, that's probably the fastest way to get through in terms of communication.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, you just brought up so many things for me. Okay, but I'm going to move on to our next question here. Says, please help me. My child has autism. He goes to school every day and there is a teacher. She lies all the time to me, to him, to the principal. I catch her lying. How do I deal with this? Do I go to the principal? Do I tell her that I know she is lying? Do I ask for a new teacher? Now, they don't say what specifically it is that she's lying about.
Yeah.
And for me, that makes a slight difference. But, you know, I feel that this is at the crux of a lot of things why parents don't trust, because somebody tells a lie, and it may not even be a big lie, but once somebody tells a lie, then the trust is gone, right? So what would
Yeah.
you advise for this parent that they do?
I mean, I think you're right, Shannon. It really depends on kind of the scope of the situation. And, you know, if it's, I guess, there's two possible situations here. One is that the parent who's writing into us, sometimes people are very offended by liars, right? And we're very, very sensitive to individuals who lie. That's, if it's just something that you are sensitive to, then I would just kind of let it go. But if the lie itself is in some way taking away from your child, then I think it is much more of an important issue, right? And then it's not something you can let go. If it's something that is perhaps affecting your child's placement, your child's IEP skills, I don't know, attention in school, whatever it might be that is somehow affecting your child, then I would suggest that you maybe document the different, like, and let it happen a few times and document it so that you actually have proof, because no one likes to be accused of lying. And generally speaking, if you go to, let's say, the principal and say the teacher is lying, the principal is going to start by defending the teacher. That's what the principal most likely will do. And then the teacher, remember, who is a liar, will probably come and lie and say, no, that never happened. So you want to make sure that you actually can prove it. It is a very big accusation. And then I think that I always suggest, if you're going to go to the principal and accuse someone, you want to have proof. You want to have proof that it's occurred more than one time. And you want to have a solution right away, which probably should be, I want my child in another class. Because I don't know that after accusing that teacher, the teacher would be able to be neutral or positive towards your child. And anyway, you probably, you know, if the individual is really someone who's dishonest, you probably don't want them teaching your child. So I think you'd want to go in when you have proof and a solution. And then you have no option but to talk to the principal.
Yeah. I love you saying, you know, if it's something that affects your child. I always like to
Right.
think, when people lie, why? Why did they tell this lie? Was this in defense of themselves and their job? Is there fear? Is there whatever? But if it's something that in any way affects your child, it immediately took me back to 6th grade. And we had a teacher that we met with the night before school started, and I was really concerned. And I was saying something to somebody, and they said, oh, you should have him changed immediately. And I remember saying, gosh, I just don't think it's that bad. And saying, you know, I'm a former classroom teacher. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want to try to work with her. I want to try whatever. And what we discovered was that, much like this teacher, this teacher liked to lie, and she did not mind lying to cover, you know, that CYA thing. She would cover her own tuchus, and in the prospect, there was a time that my son actually got hurt because she was lying to cover her butt. And I always say the biggest regret I have was not pulling him out of her classroom. That was never a part of who I was, but now I say to parents, if you feel like, you know, this is not the right fit, pull your child out of that classroom. Be the squeaky wheel, because I regret the amount of time that he spent with this woman. And it took like 6 months to build his self-esteem back. Because when somebody an adult stands there and lies, and you know you tell the truth, it changes you.
Absolutely. It changes you, and it's especially when you have, like, if you have a child on the spectrum, or any child, like, we send our kids to school with the assumption that we have someone taking care of them whom we can trust. And when that person is lying, there's no trust. So that becomes extremely difficult to have any kind of relationship with that individual. And lying is not always done maliciously, but it's sometimes people lie just because they are, like, afraid of, facing the truth or something. Like, some of the nicest, kindest people that I know lie because they are non-confrontational to the point where they don't, they lie. It's easier for them. So, but nevertheless, when someone lies, you can't depend on their word. And you can't have that with a teacher. Your child is in their care all day, and you need to have a trusting relationship.
Yeah, and I feel in this question that mom is, the concern is there. And again, we don't know what she lied about, but, I love that the last question was, do I ask for a new teacher? Because I think entirely possible. And then I have another question about conflict, but we're taking questions live right now, you guys. So we're going to do this question about conflict, but write in if you have a question right now. This one's a doozy, right? And there might be one more question in here. I have to look and see. Okay. My child's father and I don't agree on doing ABA. Truthfully, I'm not sure that we even agree on our son's diagnosis. He believes our son is fine and will grow out of it. I believe we need to do a lot of ABA. We can barely have a conversation. What advice do you have? How do I get him to see that we will be letting our son down if we don't get him the help he needs? Can I add that I think that my ex is undiagnosed, and this is the real issue. He thinks he turned out fine and our son will too. Meanwhile, our marriage ended because he is so rigid and can't see anyone else's perspective.
Oh,
I know.
that is, oh my gosh, so many layers on top of each other on this one.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was gonna start by saying, clearly, and again, it always helps when it's a live question because we can ask questions back to the person who wrote or called in. But the thing is that, clearly your ex is in denial, and I assume, right? I mean, I assume there's a diagnosis done, and this dispute is not just based on opinion.
And we're talking about denial about the child, not about the ex's diagnosis, the child's diagnosis.
Yes, the child's diagnosis, and my assumption is that there is a formal diagnosis. So let's just start there, because sometimes parents argue and one believes strongly that the child has a diagnosis and the other one believes strongly that the child doesn't. And they haven't sought out professional advice. So let's just start with that. Like, I assume that you have a professional diagnosis for your child. If you don't, you definitely need to get one. And you may also get two. You might get one from someone that your husband respects or believes is enough of an authority, right? So that's probably very important to do to begin with. Now, secondly, there are situations, like I do a lot of secondary diagnoses, because it's not an uncommon situation, especially if a child is very high functioning. It does happen that one parent may think this is not a big deal, this is going to go away. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. In your case, it sounds like maybe your husband, also your ex, also has some of the symptoms or whatever it might be. For whatever reason, they don't want to accept a diagnosis. And so I would think a little bit more about, why do they not want to accept a diagnosis? Maybe it touches too close to home. Like, maybe they think, hey, if my child, he's so similar to me. If he gets diagnosed, maybe that means there's something wrong with me as well. Or maybe a lot of parents are just are not comfortable with accepting the fact that their child might have a a disorder or a diagnosis of something that is as all-encompassing as autism. So, having denial over the diagnosis is not unusual because it's a very overwhelming experience, right? So instead of kind of fighting it, I think it's more important to just move past that. If you have a diagnosis, a formal diagnosis, the next step becomes treatment, right? And you don't need to harp on the fact that treatment follows a diagnosis. It does. I mean, every treatment requires a diagnosis, but just maybe it would be helpful if you sat with your ex and discussed the goal of treatment as opposed to the diagnosis itself. In other words, okay, whether or not he has a diagnosis, we're not going to fight over. But do you think it would be beneficial for him to maybe get some help tutoring with his social behavior or with his language or with his academics, whatever the issues might be for that child? And maybe start there and see, if it's possible for your ex to accept that, okay, maybe your child could use some help. And then he will definitely be clear of it. In other words, instead of fighting and saying, there's definitely a diagnosis here and things are going to be horrible if we don't do something about it, just look at it in a different way and just avoid the conversation about diagnosis and say, okay, fine, maybe he doesn't have a diagnosis, but look at his academic problems or look at his social. Can we at least get some help for that? So kind of go based on that premise. That might help. It is difficult if with all exes, divorced families, it's very difficult when there's disagreement. There is a possibility also, if it gets too dire and you feel that your child definitely needs ABA and your ex is not allowing that, there are mediators whose job it is to sit down, evaluate the child. And the way that you go about it actually is that the child gets you get an attorney for your child. And that person then decides what is best for the child when parents in divorce situations cannot come to an agreement.
I love all the things that you said because I feel that so many families are in this position, right? Where I recently said, speaking at a TACA conference, because somebody asked a question that was similar, like, how do you get on the same page with an ex-husband? And I said, I don't have that experience, but I feel like the expectation always is that at some point, even married couples are on the same page about treatment. And I don't know anybody who's on the same page 100% of the time, all of the time. It's always a negotiation because you're parenting. And I know the flip side of it too from so many friends that the other parent is absentee. And they tell me, man, it's all on me, and I wish that there was somebody to run ideas by. So I think it's hard no matter which situation you're in, but certainly this ex, when they are in denial about even the diagnosis, I think, I gotta say, I think it's extra hard. So I love this. So Sarah had written in and said, understand he is mourning, a loss can be reflected in denial. I think we can all agree with that, right? Because I know, most of us, myself, I was in denial about my son's diagnosis for a while. And it was simply from a place of fear. And I didn't want that for him because I didn't know what it was. So you're right, fear at the base of it. I didn't know if I could handle it. I didn't know if I would know what to do. And I had a vision board of what his life was going to look like, and it didn't look like being in ABA therapy. Now, it ended up that was our story, and I'm totally in acceptance of it, and I feel like I'm a better human being because of it. Yeah. But if you had asked me that in year one, I would have given you a different answer.
100%, Shannon. And this whole, obviously I haven't gone through it myself, but I have met a lot of parents, and it really is a very, very courageous decision to accept the diagnosis because that's the first step to getting help. And sometimes that can take forever, like a really long time. I mean, I have parents who, if they accepted the diagnosis when the child was younger, a lot could have been done, right? And and this often happens to children who are minimally affected. So, high functioning kids. So kids that are minimally affected, and parents don't realize that there are a lot of things that can be done for those children, especially helping them just understand social behavior better, will help them with succeeding in life in so many ways. And we don't want to take those opportunities away from our kids, but it is so difficult a pill to swallow, the diagnosis, that it happens quite frequently. And when you have divorce in the situation, it's so much worse, because now there's animosity and the two parents don't want to talk, and there's just, it's not good. It's not good.
I think back to years ago, probably 10 years ago now, we did, in fact, one of your daughters, it was her project, was something called Facing Fatherhood. And we had a round table with several dads where we gave them a bunch of questions, and we tried to do it in a way so that they would feel safe. Like, I had to sit outside the room on the floor on headphones to be listening, so that they felt like they were in like a boys' club and that they could just be honest. And I'm telling you, we've never, I think it ended up being a half-hour long thing. We never released it to the world because one of the dads died, and it was very touchy for a little while. But hearing the dads talk about what it's like for them, and I remember one of the dads saying, my wife is always asking me to get on the same page as her, be on the same wavelength. And he said, I've come to realize that my own, I'm going to take my boys and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because I'm a dad. I'm never going to see it from her same point of view. And she's not going to see it from mine. And he said, but I think there's a place for that. I think there's a place for all of us, but I'm not going to be her and she's not going to be me. And I remember taking that home to my husband and saying, I'm going to be a little less on you to do it my way. But I need for you to find your way. Because I think sometimes the dads, I think that the moms are afraid too, but some of the dads, not all of the dads, think, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to make money, and that will be the thing that helps. And they don't learn how to be with their kid. And I think we have to constantly be encouraging them to participate in their way. Their way. All of which goes with what you said about saying to him, what would, we're not going to argue about the diagnosis, but what help would you take for him? Here's this thing that we both see that he has a hard time with. Can we get him help for that, and see if the dad will agree to that?
Possibly. Because a lot of times, and also I remember from that experience also, I learned from one of the dads, and it was like the whole understanding that, of course, autism is 4-to-1 boys to girls. And a lot of times the dads take it much more personally, because they kind of, the child is a reflection of them. Right? And they see it as they see it as their failure. They personalize it and they see it as their fault. And there's so much stuff that goes on when we get the diagnosis. Some people will, and often it's the mom who just is like, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And sometimes the dad will be more like, you freeze, and don't know exactly what to do. I was reading about when you have very, very high levels of anxiety and fear. One of the very common reactions is, we talk about fight or flight. We know those, but there is the third one is freeze, right? And a lot of people will just, they don't know what to do because it's such an overwhelming thing. And that does happen. And like I said, couples tend to help each other out of it, and tend to communicate and figure out, and become sometimes couples become closer because they work together to make something happen. And so it makes it so much harder when there's a divorce situation, even after you get the help, even once you get the help, now it's a matter of which house, do we have the same contingencies, the same consequences? Do the therapists have to go to both houses? Do we have, it's very, very difficult.
Oh, yeah. And the paralysis piece, I used to refer to myself when that would happen for me, when the anxiety would get too much, I would refer to myself as the amazing paralyzed woman. Because I
that's
looked
the
like I was
phrase.
still
Yeah.
walking and talking, but I was completely paralyzed.
Yep.
You have helped me with that so much. The last question that we have, and then we need questions written in, you guys, write in your questions, we still have time. Hola, Alicia, and I also am saying hi to Amanda. Amanda Bluehearts is with us too.
Hey.
And both of whom I got to see at the TACA conference. It was amazing to see them both. The last question I have is, thank you for answering my previous question. It helped me a lot. From the advice you gave, now my son is doing joint attention, Dr. Granpeesheh.
awesome.
Thanks a lot. I have another question. When I ask my son where he went or what he did, he only answers the question. He doesn't give or relate information about that, doesn't give examples or describe regarding that. How do I teach it? It's a great question.
That's a great one. It's and it's an easy one actually. If you can get the help of someone who is present at whatever he went. So often we do this with our kids when they go to school, where the teacher will list all the events that occurred during the day, and then we'll secretly hand that off to you. And then you will have the opportunity to actually prompt your child. So, and the best way to prompt that is if it's visually, in my opinion, is so that you actually have like a visual board of activities, and it could be icons of people doing things, or it could be pictures, or it could be written word, anything that helps the child kind of understand the activities that occurred. So, first we had circle time, and then we went outside to play, and then we learned the alphabet or whatever it is, things that can help a sequence of activities, and you put them on a board and you just prompt and the child will go through them, and gradually you will be able to fade that out. What I have found, so that's the best way to get a child to kind of talk about just events. There's other aspects to events, which is things like when a child, what we're trying to do is we're trying to teach our children to mimic or learn gradually the whole components of a conversational response when you ask them about something when you were not present, right? So it starts with asking about the sequence of events, but remember that our kids often will start with something that was not necessarily chronological, but the most important, or the thing that made the biggest impression. So for example, if a child is talking about a regular day in school, and on that day, for instance, there's a fire alarm, that's going to be the first thing they'll tell you in normal conversation. So you always want to make sure that if the sequence of events that, let's say, the teacher gave you has something that's out of the ordinary, that goes first, so that your child can learn that, oh, the thing that was most memorable is the one that I'll start talking about. And then, when mom says, and what else, then I can go through the rest of the normal activities. The other thing is, there's other aspects of what kids will tell us aside from their activities, right? They'll talk about friends who were there. They'll talk about their emotions. They'll talk about, something that they will remind them of something at home. So try to expand on the conversation. Once your child says, and then we went to lunch, try to shape that and ask a lot of questions. Oh, who else was there? And, what were they eating? And things that will elaborate and get your child to elaborate. But what helps in the beginning is just the sequence of events, so that the child knows, okay, this is what's expected, is that I should go through the things. And remember, this happens because our kids sometimes don't realize why you don't know. And there's a lot of activities we do where the child, you might be in a room with a child and then you'll leave the room, and maybe you have a view into the room that is like a camera in the room or something. And you then can ask the child a lot of questions. But for our kids to understand, this is part of theory of mind deficit, to understand that your perspective or your vision of the situation didn't exist because you were not physically present. That's a task in itself. And teaching our child like perspectives is a whole different lesson, which I'm happy to talk about as well.
Well, and can I bring up skills at this point for people?
Yeah.
Like if you're grooving on this conversation and going, well, where do I find all these lessons? Where would I see all of this?
Yeah.
I remember experiencing them teaching these things to Jem, and we didn't know what the names of these lessons were, so we came up with our own names for them. Like there was one that we called Burying the Headline, because he would come in and he would tell us what happened at school, but then later on he would say, oh, and then the fire truck came, and we'd be like, you buried the headline. But correct me if I'm wrong, that lesson is called saliency.
Yes, exactly.
There's so
saliency lesson, and you might remember the perspective taking lesson, which there's multiple different ways to do that, which essentially starts with just sensory perspectives, right? So for instance, if I'm, I always give this example when I'm giving a lecture. So like, for instance, what I see right now is very different from what you see, Shannon, and we could be describing those things to each other. And we do that with our kids and actually have them try to draw it so that they can understand that we're looking at different things.
Yes.
Just being able to understand that concept, that people don't always see what I'm seeing. Yeah. They see different thing. That is a big wow moment for a lot of our kids, and it helps them understand why you're asking certain questions from them.
Yeah, I remember vividly the day that we played all those games, and we had a barrier set up where he would be on one side with the therapist and I would be on the other side, and they would have him smell the little Dixie cup with the lemons. What are you smelling? Can mom smell that? But then, and we would go through this, and he was getting it, but he wasn't really getting it. And then I was in the other room and a fire truck went by. And they could see it in the room that they were in. And the therapist said, it was Peter, he said, what do you see? And he said, I see a fire truck. And he said, can mom see the fire truck? And he thought about it for a second. He went, no, mom can't see the fire truck. And then the next question in the lesson is, why can't mom see the fire truck? And he said, because she's in a room without a window. And I remember I came out and we partied like it was 1999. It was because he got it for the first time. And then you can never take that away from him, right? But all of these lessons that we're talking about are in skills. They're there.
Yeah, they are. And many others too. Because
thousands.
This whole thing started many years ago. Gosh, I'm trying to remember when. It was in the 90s, I think, when Simon Baron-Cohen, who's a fantastic researcher in England, in Cambridge, he came up with the concept of theory of mind, and the way that he did it was this amazing experiment that they did called the Sally Ann task. And if you remember, the Sally Ann task is super interesting how they thought of this. And they had 3 groups of kids, and one group was typically developing kids, one group was kids with autism. I think the average age was 5. And then they had a third group that was kids who had Down syndrome. And they showed them a little cartoon. And the cartoon was Sally and Anne, 2 little girls. They are in a room and they're playing. And then there's a ball and there's 2 containers. There's like a basket and a bin, right? And Sally puts the ball in the bin and she leaves the room. And after she's gone, Anne goes and gets the ball and moves it from the bin to the basket and then goes and sits down. And then Sally comes back in the room, and the audience, the kids, are then asked, where will Sally look for her ball, right? And of course, the typically developing kids, and even the children with Down syndrome, could respond and say, oh, she's going to look in the bin because that's where she put it. But the kids with the autism, all were like, the majority were saying she would look in the basket.
Yeah.
Because they saw the ball being moved to the basket. They thought, Sally knows this as well. I know it, so Sally knows this. And this was the beginning of the concept of a theory of mind, that our minds are separate, and that children with autism tend to not understand how my mind is separate from your mind. These are hidden, and the things that are in my mind you don't know, and what's in your mind I don't know.
Yeah.
And that led to a thousand other like advances in the treatment of autism. It wasn't just that we started teaching the concept of not knowing things that you've not seen, but then it was also not knowing things that you've not heard or that you've not asked, or what if someone lies to you, or like it just expanded so significantly, and went all the way into realizing that, oh, this is why some of our kids have a hard time lying.
Yeah.
Because they don't realize that they can, or telling a joke, they don't realize that no one else knows what's in their mind, right?
Yeah.
So if they hold the punchline in their mind, they can actually, no one else will know right away. Or, all of these skills that develop with typically developing kids, because they have the ability to understand that people have separate minds, all of that is delayed until you can teach it to the person with autism. So it's a whole very interesting area. And yes, as you said, Shannon, we built a whole curriculum area called cognition in skills, and many of the lessons there have to do with this concept.
It's good stuff. I also love that the entertainment world has sort of grabbed a hold of this now and has done some things to help us to teach this. That Disney movie Inside Out, where we get to see the emotions in people's brains, and we get to see it in other people's brains. Brilliant to show to your kiddo, to begin to talk about what's in my brain is different from what's in your brain. Love it. Yes. Okay, Taryn has written in and said, hi ladies, my 4-year-old is in ABA full-time. What's some important social skills he needs to learn before school? He is fully verbal. We love that, Taryn.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Taryn, I'll give you some ideas, but it would be a disservice to you. And I really do suggest that even if you become get a license on skills for 1 month, you should go in there, because there's going to be 1,000 things. And I'm not sure I'm even classifying them the same way you are. So I'm going to give you a few ideas. I don't know if I would call them social skills. Some are more like school readiness skills, and there's a variety of them. And it would be really important to kind of figure out the ones that are important for your child, right? So and the best way, honestly, if you want to do this on your own, is just to go in and observe a few other kids throughout their school experience, because it depends on how, like, let's say is your child going to get on a bus? If so, then that starts with, what is the appropriate greeting for the bus driver? How does your child ask another kid if they can sit next to him? What does the child do as soon as they get off the bus in school? How does your child greet friends versus teachers? What are some conversational topics that your child can engage in with other children? What are some of the school rules in terms of when you can converse as opposed to when you have to be quiet? In school, how do you get a teacher's attention is by raising your hand as opposed to blurting something out. So there's both school readiness skills and social skills. And I would go through the entire day and try to list every single thing that you can teach that would be helpful to your child. And if it's a matter of even if, getting permission and going to school on a weekend when other kids are not there, or after school, and just practicing it, or making sure that your child feels comfortable and remembers the rules, because there are rules for each environment, and also rules depending on who your child is interacting with, whether it's the teacher, the principal, or a child or a peer. All of those things come together to help us behave appropriately socially. It's quite a lot.
It is a lot. So we've talked a little bit about skills, and I'm pretty sure that you can access skills by going to skills4autism.com. And
Right.
usually what they like to do is give you a walkthrough first, an appointment. If you have any difficulty with accessing that via the, online, you can write to me and I can forward your email to the person who will give you that walkthrough. So if you need it, my email is shannon@autism-live.com. And I'm a huge fan of skills, always have been, because everybody is looking for like what's the manual, and it's different for everyone. And what I love about skills is that the first thing that you do is you answer some questions, which rules out a bunch of questions. But one of the first questions that you get asked is how old your child is. And I know that we're all very hypersensitive online about putting real information about our child. And for me, if you want to lie about everything else, feel free to, but don't lie about that. Because what it does is it automatically gauges for you, and it's not going to give you lessons that are not appropriate for somebody your child's age. I think back to the very first IEP that Jem had, and the goal that they had in kindergarten, it was actually preschool, was that they wanted him to be able to sit and attend in circle time for an hour, for a full hour with no break. And I thought, my goodness, that would be hard for me to sit on the floor and attend for an hour. You better have a really good story to tell me, because I can't do that. And then I asked somebody, and they were like, that's not an appropriate goal for somebody who's 4 on the autism spectrum. We want to work towards that when he's in kindergarten or first grade, but an hour? No. So I love that Skills automatically gauges that for you and says, we're not going to give you something that would be, now if your child can do a 7-year-old skill, that's wonderful, but then you don't need to be working on that. There are other things that you should be working on that are age appropriate for them. And that little thing of putting your child's, their date of birth in, what happens is if you stay on Skills for any length of time, every time they have a birthday, they'll add in more lessons for you. I used to get a notice saying, new lessons have been added to your son's pool of lessons. And it was a very exciting thing. Oh, what else could we learn here? But it's a roadmap. It's a really important roadmap.
And the thing that's really important, Shannon, also is when you start to answer questions, because the way that it works is, as Shannon said, you put your age in, then you get a bunch of questions, you start answering these questions, yes or no, regarding what your child can do. And I want parents to be very, very honest there too, because often we overestimate, like we don't, not that we overestimate, but we kind of, we say that our kids can do things when they really can't. Maybe we've seen it happen once, and that isn't really something that the child is good at doing. The more things you say no to, the better, because you'll get all those lessons and then your child can practice them, master them. If your child knows it, then it'll be moved to mastery very quickly. But it's not good if you say a child can do something when they can't, because then Skills won't be able to give you that lesson, right? Because it thinks that your child already knows that lesson, and it makes everything else hard because the lessons are in kind of an order of hierarchy, and it's important to really have a solid understanding of the basics before you move to the higher level stuff.
Thank you for saying that, because I had forgotten that one of the things when you're answering the questions, sometimes it can be hard because you think to yourself, well, they've done it a couple of times.
Sometimes, yeah.
And the question that I would always ask myself, is this an area where I would like for them to be working on it and becoming better at this? And if that is an area where I want it worked on, then I would say no.
That's a
So
good
it
way
took
to
away.
do it.
I also love that when it asks a question, sometimes you'll look at it and you'll go, I'm not sure I know what that means. There's always a button that basically you learn the button, it's like more information, and then it puts it in really simple terms and it's much clearer. You go, oh, no, for sure. They can't do that, or for sure they can do that. And when I also love, there's a name for it, but the test learns. So if, for example, the question is, can your child walk upstairs by themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And you say no, then it's not going to ask you more questions about walking upstairs by themselves. It might ask you questions about, can they do it if you're holding their hand, but it won't ask you, like, are they able to do it foot over foot? If you say that they can walk upstairs without holding your hand, then the next question will be, can they do it foot over foot, or do they step up on a step and step up on another step? But it automatically will take the question away if you've said no, that they can't walk upstairs. So
what
I
it does,
love that
it's intelligent learning. So what it does is it doesn't ask you questions about more difficult tasks in that area, because you've already established the baseline.
Yes.
And it's really good because once you, even if you read the examples and you still don't know, you can always hit, I don't know. And the item will go into a probe basket so that we can look at it later and figure out if the child can or cannot do it.
And Susie says, how can someone get training on learning how to manage skills? I've tried and I was confused. I think that that's a common thing, Susie, because it's a big tool. And
it's hard, yeah.
I always say that it's like Disneyland, and that it's better to go in with a guide and have a plan about what am I going in to see on the first day, and not try to see everything the first day. So I'd be happy to do that with you, Susie. Also, I know that Miriam over at Skills is very good and willing to do tutorials, but my question when I go into Skills with a parent is, what is it that you want out of this tool today? Are you looking to come up with IEP goals? Are you looking to find things to work on with your child? Are you looking to check their behavior intervention plan from school? Are you wanting to take in a new goal to say to the teacher? Are you wanting to look at where your child is, just a snapshot of where they are in their skills to see, what areas you might want to work on? Because all of those things are different places and they're all valid. I wouldn't want to see them all on the same day.
But it would be so helpful, I think, Shannon, for us to produce like a small video that is a step-by-step guide of kind of how to use skills as a parent.
I think you're right.
If you and I, we should talk about it, because now that we have the amazing Chris Desmond,
I know
we produce all these different videos, as long as like Miriam or someone can do like a demo.
Yes.
And that would be so helpful for us to have.
Let's do that. Thank you, Susie, for bringing it up. I just realized we are past time and I got to let you go. You've got places you've got to go. But we love you. We thank you so much, Dr. Granpeesheh, for being with us. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here. And I'll see you in person next week.
Yes, you will. You absolutely will. Thank you so much. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you for being here with Dr. Granpeesheh and with me. And we will be back. We are not back tomorrow. I'm finishing the toy guide. We are back on Monday. And then we are going to soon be into Festival of Toys. And we have a lot of exciting guests coming up. So we'll see you on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.